To Midway, know that they have this. This is a little unit that you would take to a certain area in the museum, and it will give you your tour. And in different languages. I'm arguing about the Spanish because it's Castilian, so that's not going to be a good thing. But we're having to do this because we just don't have enough people on deck. So come on in. You can see them do that. They only get like a 5-minute talk. I know you can all talk a lot more. Everything is being taken from the Docent manual. Kevin is doing that. If you don't know Kevin Sheehan, he is our librarian and our curator. So everything will be extremely exact. But you will see this. I wasn't aware of this until actually yesterday. But they're not going to get as good a tour from a recording as they will from a person with a heart. So bring in your heart.
Okay.
We talked last week about using a smartphone to talk with people who don't speak English. 2 days ago, I was on San Salvador. A Chinese couple came on board who spoke no English, and I had quite an extended conversation with them via Google Translate on my phone. It actually worked really well, and they were very happy to be able to talk with someone and ask questions. It really does work.
The chairman of the board is here, Mr. Stephanov.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Stephanov, and I am the board chair this year. And
He went through sales training with my husband. He went through sales training with Alex.
I love Alex. Mr. George used to get us mixed up, so I would make a mistake and Alex would get the blame. It was terrific. I just want to express my appreciation on behalf of the board and the whole institution for what you all do. We're more than a collection of ships. We're not just a thing in a museum. We're a cultural institution. And the thing about cultural institutions is that they tell stories. And this is the group that tells the story. So it is the story. This is the group that makes, and the story that we tell, that makes the critical difference between us and other institutions in San Diego. So I want you to keep that in mind as you do your volunteer and know that that is so important to the institution and its future. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And welcome. Who else would like to? Is it time for, or did you want to say something first, Jim?
It's time for Bob.
Okay, it's time for Bob. Bob, you're on.
Good morning! That was a sound check. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about logistics and how to log into it. But first, I have a few commercials. This is the way it works. Number one, there are still books available if you're interested. They're over here, $45. They're not going to go on sale. That's going to be the price. But if you want, we have plenty of it. So feel free to do that. Second commercial for the trainees. On our website is what I found when I went to this, a very, very nice document called Docent Tour Speaking Points. About 9 or 10 pages or something. I don't know if you've seen this or not. But if you want to know how to do a tour, this gives you more information than you'll be able to spit out in 2 hours. But it's a very, very good way of doing this. I think the last one was done by Tom Shipman.
But Steve Andrews.
And Steve Andrews, yeah. And Steve Andrews, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Steve. So that's, of course, on the website. You can download it and print it out. And last week when we did the San Salvador, I talked a little bit about a carry-along book that we made. And this is available. Actually, I have the PDF file of it. And if you send me an email and say I would like a copy of it, it would be great. It has pictures and statistics and stuff. And what we find is, as you are walking around doing deck watch, it's a very nice thing to have because you can convince people that yes, we do sail these ships. All right. I'm going to hand this out to the trainees just to take a look at. And again, if you're interested in it, send me an email, I'll send you a copy of it. You have to do your own arts and crafts.
What's your email address? Yeah.
harrisonrm@gmail.com. Right, now we're going to talk a little about how we log into logistics. And I just want to make sure that all of our trainees, and actually all of our docents, do you have this card? If no one has this, if you don't have this card, see Rebecca, right? Actually, everything we say, if somebody isn't there, see Rebecca, right? Okay. So this is mine, and it has my secret code, and it has that QR code on it. But what I wanted to show you is there's multiple ways that you can log in. First off, if you go to the ticket booth, this is what you see. We have the iPad up there, and if you don't remember what your volunteer code is, there's a book of them, you can look it up, and you can punch it in. That's one way.
Just gave your wife's code away.
So here's my card. Actually, what we found works really, really well is you can actually take your card and scan it and a QR code, and it will launch the site, the logistics site itself. But what we found that works really well is you take a picture of your card. That way you've got that QR code and you've got your number. And at least on iPhones, I don't know about Android.
It does not work on that.
It does not work on Android. All you have to do is,
Depends on how old your Android is.
It also depends on how old your iPhone is.
but if I tap on this photo, it will launch where you can log in. All right? So, multiple ways. You can scan that little QR code, measure your number. You can scan your card, it has your number on it, or you can take a photo of this and do it this way. Okay? And of course, when you sign in, there's a whole big selection list. So for us folks here doing our meeting here, it will be called Docent Meetings. Or Docent Training?
No, those are
Docent Meetings, okay. There you go. Just like that. Right. So, I want to see a show of hands. Has anybody not signed in today? You forgot. See, we got to make sure that we do this. You can always do what I end up doing is take the keys out of my car. I'm parked here. I log in. As soon as I leave, I log out. But you can do it a variety of different ways. It's just very good to do that. Okay? When you sign out, I'm going to tap on sign out. It's going to ask you for your round trip travel. And it's going to tell you where's back here. So, very important that when you log in, and then when you leave the premises, you log out. Not only is that for keeping track of our hours, but it's very, very important because little Rebecca there knows who's on premise, and so if there's an emergency, we want to know who is here and who's not here, so they don't have to send anybody. Yes. Say that again, please.
Are we still using VicNet to keep track of our hours? When I do that,
I guess the answer is there's also the website.
Yeah, the VicNet is okay if you forget when you're here, or if you are doing a sanctioned volunteer project at home, you can go ahead and put your stuff in. That way, if you're here on campus, please use the tablet or your QR code. My son is head of security here. If I tell him you didn't show up at the evacuation point, I'm not sending him in to come find you. I will come find you. But I didn't put in 37 years of mothering because you didn't clock out, okay?
All right, is that clear for folks? Just remember, you can always look at it to the point of if you walk past the ticket booth and you haven't signed in yet, you better stop. Okay. I have one more thing and then we're done. So for the trainees, we have next week and the week after that, we're going to be talking about the Star of India. And what we have for the trainees is a free copy, and we're going to pay for it, of what Rebecca has on her hand. This is this was our 150th anniversary commemorative. It has everything in it you ever wanted to know about the Star of India.
Bob,
Yes.
What happens if we change assignments during our period here at the museum? We covered that.
If you're just continuing your deck watch, you don't have to change.
Yeah.
If you do need to change, there is a change.
Rich, that's a good point, and that is, what I find works the best is when you're doing your assignment, there's something called deck watch roaming. And because anyone who's done deck watch, you don't stay in one spot. You usually are circulating around. That's a good catch-all, right? That way you don't have to worry about, oh, I did 15 minutes on the surprise and 10 minutes on this or whatever. It just works out really, really well that way. But that brings up a good point. I'd like, for the docents, not the docent trainees, I'd like to see who is planning on being here on deck watch in the next week, meaning from Wednesday to that, okay? I see 1, 2, 3, all right.
Enough to go around.
All right, so David, what days do you plan on being here? Do you know?
Probably on Monday.
All right, trainees, this would be a good time for you to observe the deck watches. It's not a shadow, but it's observing what they do. So you can kind of stand in the back so you don't sit there talking to each other, whatever. But see how they do it, all right? Who else is coming next week? Well, you're always here. Yeah, okay, go ahead. What days are you going to be here?
Mondays and Thursdays.
Mondays and Thursdays, all right? So trainees, you come down Mondays and Thursdays? See, go look for anybody else that's come in this week? Rick?
I'm Fridays, I'm in the engine room. Up at-
Fridays are in the engine room?
Yeah.
I'll see what it's like.
Yeah, okay.
And Mr. Phillipson
Okay,
is here quite
Doug?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, all right. You can always come always on Sundays. Gerton actually is here on Sundays on the Star. He's a real good guy to listen to because he usually stays right by the companionway as people come down the stairs, and he gives them a 2-minute elevator speech. It's fantastic. Gives an idea where to go. Claire, I think you raised your hand?
Yeah, on Saturday.
You're on Saturday.
Yeah.
All right? You guys are on Saturday, okay. All right, so I am done.
Yeah, but you got a line behind you now. Okay.
This is a public service announcement from the video engineer to all speakers. If you are speaking and you are not between these two poles, you are not on the video.
Good.
And it's very odd. This voice comes from on high and speaks. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, Kevin, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Between the calls. Do we get access to the internet here?
I believe so. This is Dr. Kevin Sheehan. He is curator and librarian and all kinds of wonderful other things.
Editor of Mainsville Hall.
Editor of Mainsville Hall, yes.
Mover of bottles. That stairway goes up the ladder. It's closed. Slippery enough to kill
Sorry about the interruption here, folks. Okay.
So what Kevin is trying to queue up is the guide ID that we mentioned briefly.
I haven't set up 2 monitors right now, that's fine.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing up. And I wanted to introduce you to the new docents here. Here they are. All right, so we can all go home and leave it to this little device, right? So first up, let me explain this. This is not to replace any human being at all, me or you, but this is intended to be a communication device in the absence of people who come along, like yourselves, who generously donate your time to us and who interact in a lively and engaging manner with our visitors. All right? How many of you speak one language? 2 languages? 3? 4? 5? Okay. This little thing does, apparently. So that's the advantage, right? That's how I'm pitching it to you today. I honestly don't know how this is going to go. We have 30 of these. This was discovered, I think, by our marketing department at the USS Midway. And some of you, perhaps, who work down there or volunteer down there have seen visitors walking around with these devices, engaging in what is essentially a pre-recorded series of tours, right, that describe various parts of the Midway. I have not seen it in action. So this is very much an experiment on our part to see how this will go. One of the big challenges we've had here in the past is communicating with visitors who don't have English as a first language and are comfortable in communications in English. Some museums go around and having signage in multiple languages. We've tried that in English and Spanish, but it can get very cumbersome. Right, and it would require a huge revision of our entire exhibit space in order to accommodate not only, say, Spanish, but also then maybe Chinese or who knows what else. So this is a solution that we're trying to work with to see what we can come up with in terms of communicating with our visitors. How it will work is a visitor will be given one of these if they choose. It's not obligatory by any means, and they don't pay for it. It's just an optional thing. And then they'll see a little, what they call beacon, a little sign on a wall. They'll go up, they'll tap the beacon or engage it somehow with this, and then listen to their preferred language. About a paragraph or so, briefly explaining what the area is that they are looking at. Where have I found the material for this? In your docent manual. I have blatantly plagiarized it, copied and pasted it into this little program. Okay, so these are your words, these are the docent words. These are not things that I've come up with off the internet or whatever. There's also another function I just actually played around with this morning. I was hoping to show you the back end of the program here, but I can't log in from this device. I can from my library one. That works with AI. We've all heard about AI. I've not used it much myself in my work or in my teaching. Students have when they've tried to cheat. Sometimes it's it's easy to detect, sometimes not so much. But nevertheless, I haven't used it. This morning, I simply pasted in the text that I would normally use for an adult portion of the tool. When I say adult, I mean pitching it to people of mature age. And then hit the AI button, and I asked for the kids-friendly version. And sure enough, it came up with a whole paragraph full of words like awesome and amazing, and all that sort of thing. I'd really hoped to show it to you, but I can't bring it up here at the moment. But it's an experiment. We'll see how it goes, and I'm always interested in getting your feedback. What we will do is start this as a pilot program, and again, I would really ask your advice and your assistance in seeing how this works for us. If it's an upgrade, or if it's something that is maybe not necessary that we might repeat in the future. We're going to try it out and see. Yeah.
How does the museum ensure that these gadgets remain on campus?
Very good question. I believe two things will be attached to them. A little device that will activate should they be taken off campus, and secondly, some sort of flotation device as well. Which most museums don't have to worry about, right? But it does. I'm told these are waterproof, which is also really helpful. We'll see.
Kevin, does that have like the numbers on it you press or something? How does it know where you are?
I think it detects it through some sort of QR code that you activate with it.
Any chance I could like walk around with those? I'd love to see hear what it tells me.
Yeah.
I want to see
Yeah.
if it's got Bob's lies in it.
Well, we haven't actually put up the QR codes or the beacons yet. We're still.
I'd like to be a victim of that.
Absolutely, yeah. This is exactly what I need help with, or we need help with, in terms of testing this out, seeing how it works. And obviously, some parts of our campus here don't have great Wi-Fi, and this may not work, say, for example, down in the Dalton. That's understandable, right? Or in the engine room, but maybe it does. Yeah.
How do the guests get those? Do they pay for them, or?
They don't. This is an optional thing. I think people in the front desk will simply tell a visitor, if you want the guided tour, if you're interested in multilingual tour, just check in with Jane or whoever is working in the store, and she has a whole bank of these, and then she'll collect them. Or there'll be kind of like a drop box at the exit that you'll put these in. They will have to be periodically cleaned, of course. And recharged as well. It's kind of like your cell phone, you have to recharge it every so often.
So as a docent, I could just pick one up coming in when I'm going to do a deck watch and just walk around and listen to it and give you feedback?
Yeah, absolutely.
By email?
By email or whatever. One of the things I worry about is the stuff I put in there. Is it too much? You get bored after a while listening to this. Maybe it's too much. Less, maybe more. But again, the words have been vetted many times by those of you who've worked on the Docent manual over the years. So it's the accumulated wisdom of our museum docents that we're mining here. Yeah.
Is it an AI-generated voice? Or is it yours?
It's not mine, okay? There's a whole list of voices you can choose. Couple of things. I chose the American English one. She sounds very perky, very happy, so that's one thing. The Spanish voices are interesting. They're not sort of, we'll say, Latin American Spanish. They are very much European. They're Spaniards speaking to you. So I don't know how that's going to go over. I'm told that it went over okay at the midway, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you again for your attention. You can check out guide-id.com and you'll see their information about what places right around the world are actually using this.
Alrighty.
My assignment for this morning is to tell you a little bit about the HMS Rose, the original 1757 ship, and the replica that is currently the HMS Prize. Although I'll show you definitively that it still has the HMS, in quotes, Rose Bell forward. I need to remind myself and all of you that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and both portions of this talk are based on a really nice talk prepared by Richard Wolff. And for additional reading, don't see it. Anyway. Oh.
There's Rich.
Thank you so much for your talk. And a little anecdote about Richard. When I was a youthful trainee, a year ago, and I was complaining about, I can't make these shadow tours on Saturdays because, I have to race small boats in the bay. My skippers would be mad at me, and yada, yada, yada. After about 15 minutes of this, Richard chimed up from the back and said, "All right, Phillipson, what are you doing tomorrow?" So we're lucky to use each other as resources, and I recommend that. Now, I feel that my part of the talk doesn't really have a lot to do with the Pacific part of our mission. So I thought I'd throw in a couple of views from, the old days, when the Pacific wasn't that well known. And people would say, I told you so, you go too far and you fall off. Anyway. The reality is, what are we doing here? And I take this very seriously, actually. We are the community memory, and we collect, preserve, and present our maritime heritage and our connection with the Pacific world. So we don't fall off. It's important that we all come to some mutual understanding of the stories that we tell. So I'm going to talk about a British naval warship, and for somebody who's somewhat of a pacifist, that's an interesting proposition. And then I'm going to talk about the, in quotes, HMS Rose replica, and some interesting stories that came about when this guy just, before the bicentennial, decided, wouldn't it be nice to build a tall ship? And, I don't have any money, but, no problems. Bob Harrison mentioned his, what I call a Docent walking around book. And this is a page from that book. And I recommend that everybody just send Bob an email and get the book. I have a copy. It's sitting on my kitchen table, which was an appropriate place because I wanted to put it in my bag and bring it, but of course, I forgot. Anyway, the point of this, and I'll make this point in another slide, is that the Rose and the Rose Prize are about as close as you can get to an original and a replica that we have. So, which HMS Rose? I Googled HMS Rose and I came up with about 21 different ships. Take your pick from the 1200s to the late 1800s. And by the way, Jim, before I started my talk, reminded me that HMS was probably not used even at the time of the Rose. Although, I don't know what to believe on that story now. So, anybody has an opinion? I'm open. Needless to say, a rose by any other name is still a rose. So I'm not gonna read every letter of this slide, although if I was a good guy, I would have had this and another slide of talking points in a handout. What we know about her is that she was built in 1757. She participated in the 7 Years' War. And in 1768, she was considered for Cook's expedition to the Pacific. So there's a link to the Pacific. Then under the command of the dreaded James Wallace, Rose patrolled the New England coast, specifically around Rhode Island and Connecticut, where she really put a dent in the smuggling trade. And, oh, by the way, when she needed extra crew for one reason or another, she would just take them off of other ships, which was a British thing at the time. It's called impressment of seamen. And I just don't see how it's different than slavery, except that at the end of some period of indenturement, you were let go on hopefully some port that you could make your way back to home from. She stopped a lot of the smuggling in the colonies and was probably, as much as anything, the impetus for the creation of the Continental Navy prior to the Revolution. What else do I want to say? Nothing else here that I won't go into. So there's a point that's made often. The Rose was a 6th-rate ship, and I wanted to explain a little bit about what that is. The Royal Navy's rating in the 16 to 1800s was based on the number of guns, the crew, something called builder's measure, which I couldn't find units for, so it's somehow related to the capacity of a ship, and I wish I could explain that more. And of course, the number of guns and the number of gun decks. So you can see a 6th-rate ship is the rating that is the smallest ship, and one that wouldn't be used as a ship of the line necessarily, probably as a messenger, and had about 20 guns. So illustrating that in another way, we have the Rose replica with us, and she was used for a lot of her life as a sailing trainee ship. The armament was 28 9-pounders, which were mostly decorative. She was about 500 tons, had an LOA of about 180 feet, 1 gun deck, and a 32-foot beam. So what did the actual Rose look like? Crew complement, as you saw before, 160, 29-pounders, about 500 tons. Again, 179 or 180 feet, 109-foot gun deck, and a 31-foot beam. That is the same between the Rose and the replica. So the replica is a very, very close approximation of the original. Compare that to a 1st-rate ship. You jump from 160 total personnel to 850 or so. Instead of 20 guns, you might have 104 guns. And by the way, what were most of the crew doing or assigned for in these 6th or 1st-rate ships? Why did you need 160 people? Because I know that anybody who has any sailing experience would say, oh yeah, 30 people, we could take the Rose and do anything we needed to do with the 16 sailors, right?
Gun crew.
No, that's good. Anyway, the displacement of the ship is much greater, and 3 gun decks, 186 feet long versus 100 feet long, So we get the idea that a first-rate ship is something that's going to be considerably larger and more powerful in terms of guns than a sixth-rate ship. And that's the whole idea. So what was the original Rose doing? Well, after the 7 Years' War, she was sent to the American coast to patrol. And one of the things that she did, unfortunately, of course, in the 1700s, I couldn't find a lot of photographs. So I'm sort of stuck with drawings of things. And this is Boston in 1768. And the Rose is there somewhere, although I couldn't pick her out here. This is an example of Rose's logs, where on February 22nd of 1775, she boarded a sloop called the Lively, and it had contraband on board. And that's what those two layers said. And this is from Naval Documents of the American Revolution. It's a 13-volume set. Very useful. So Richard spent some time talking about the seafarer's disease. Anybody tell me what that is? Yes. And about what percent of a crew on a long voyage might come down and eventually succumb to scurvy? At least half, right? Yeah, so give us half. That's why, I guess, why you need 160 people, because you know you're gonna lose a lot. So there's a nice ugly picture of a scurvy victim, and you can see there's a variety of symptoms. And although scurvy is not directly connected with the Rose per se, I want to tell a story about one of the first clinical trials. I'm a former pharmaceutical analytical chemist, and so this has particular meaning to me. Scurvy is an awful disease that often results in death, and I want to tell you about the first clinical trial that took place on a British warship in 1747. A guy named James Lind, who was acting as a surgeon at the time, wanted to try to determine what might have been causing it. And so he took 12 scurvy victims, divided them up into pairs in 6 different groups, and fed them different things. Like, one group of 2, don't you know, got seawater. We can imagine their fate. Another lucky group got lemons. And in a week, they were better. Unfortunately, and Lind actually wrote this up, and there's an article by Aaron Bent that I want to write, or actually read a description of. Lind describes, on the 20th of May, 1747, I selected 12 patients in the scurvy. On board the Salisbury at sea, their cases were as similar as I could have them. They all, in general, had putrid gums, the spots and lassitude with weakness of the knees. They lay together in one place, being a proper apartment for the sick in the forehold, and had one diet common to all, viz. Water, gruel, sweetened with sugar in the morning, fresh mutton broth, oftentimes for dinner, at other times light pudding, boiled biscuit with sugar, etc. And for supper, barley and raisins, rice and currants, sago and wine or the like. 2 were ordered each a quart of cider a day. 2 others took 25 drops of Excelsior of vitriol, whatever that is, 3 times a day. 2 others took 2 spoonfuls of vinegar 3 times a day. 2 of the worst patients were put on a course of seawater. 2 others each had 2 oranges and 1 lemon given to them every day. The 2 remaining patients took an electricity recommended by a hospital surgeon. It wasn't specified in this article. The consequence was that the most sudden and visible good effects were perceived from the use of oranges and lemons. One of those who had taken them being at the end of the 6 days fit for duty. The other was the best recovered of any in his condition and was appointed to attend the rest of the sick. Next to oranges, I thought the cider had the best effects. And these are James Lind's words, writing in 1753. Unfortunately, although the results were clear, The use of citrus, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, wasn't instituted in the British Navy for another 50 years. Why? Because it was too expensive, don't you know? So one thing that this slide illustrates is that you actually ate pretty well, apparently, in the British Navy. I hope you can read that. And it wasn't until 1793 that Admiral Gardner insisted on lemons and limes being part of the ship's stores. Questions about that? Well, you know, if you're a working sailor, it's not trivial work, right? Haul on some of these lines for a 4-hour sail. You'll see it takes something out of you, but yeah, that's a lot of calories and a lot of ethanol.
Well, water was cheap.
Yeah, I would probably have preferred to drink beer to water in those days. Anyway, what was the Rose doing during our revolution? Like I mentioned, she was supplying the Boston garrison. She played a huge role in driving Washington's army from New York in 1776. Then patrolled south in 1777, 1779, capturing prizes, and eventually she was in bad condition in only 1779, having lived about 2 decades, which is the normal length of a wooden ship in those days. And she was sunk in the Savannah Harbor to make a block so that the French and Americans couldn't land troops from the sea to get rid of the British at Savannah. And this is another shot of the Phoenix and the rose. The roses right there, engaged by enemy fire, and there's a colorized version of it, which I like better. This was in August of 1776, where the Rose and Phoenix sailed up the Hudson pretty much at will. And I want to talk a little bit about how history is made and sometimes remade. There was in 21 a cannon from the Savannah River picked up as part of our dredging. And if I can, I want to play it a little. I hope the volume is about right.
Rare relics from an important period in early Georgia history rose from the Savannah River in January 2022 as archaeologists completed recovery of 15 cannon believed to be from more than one Revolutionary War shipwreck. The mystery first unfolded in late February 2021 when a dredge unexpectedly sucked up 3 iron guns and fragments of anchors at a deep spot in front of Old Fort Jackson known as 5 Fathom Hole.
It was a surprise. This was completely unexpected.
No pun intended.
They thought that dredging had occurred in this area several times, and it was clear that it had, but none of these materials had ever been brought up before.
But there'd been so much dredging in the river that I don't think anybody really expected this. They've survived all the dredging. That was probably the biggest surprise.
Early suspicions focused on the HMS Rose, a famous British warship intentionally sunk here in 1779. But research quickly discounted that possibility, since historical documents showed the Rose was sunk further upriver, and more importantly, that all of her weapons were removed prior to sinking. British archives indicate that the weapons on the river bottom were actually the remains of 2 or more commercial vessels used to transport British troops, ships that were also sunk to block the river when a large enemy fleet suddenly appeared off Tybee Island.
The French had blockaded the port of Savannah, getting ready to attack. So they scuttled these troop transports to keep the French out and, basically save the city early on from being taken over. They plugged the channel to where the ships could not come up, the French could not come up and take the city.
Dredging in the area was halted, and sonar surveys revealed the presence of more than a dozen more cannons scattered on the river bottom at 5 Fathom Hole. The
I've
Savannah
shown you
District
what I
U.S. Army
want.
Corps of
Shall we go
Engineers
on?
brought in a team of experts, highly regarded.
And no talk on the roads will be complete without talking about how one loads a cannon.
Gun.
Gun. What's the difference?
Gun. Guns are on ships, cannons are on land.
The difference is that a gun is on a carriage meant for a ship, and a cannon is on a carriage meant to be towed around land. Somebody more senior to me in the Docent world want to corroborate that, or is?
Absolutely rolling along.
Thanks. Anyway, I found this 3 minutes blurb, if I can get it to run. A great illustration of how one loads a cannon. Let's do it now. No, actually, the British won many times because they were really good at this, unlike me, who hasn't practiced it. It worked just this morning. If I have to. The problem with the link, of course, it takes me out to...
Is to be run inboard, in which case the secured tackles and breeching are to be cast off and the gun run inboard. Once the gun has been run inboard, we can commence with the loading procedure, and we start with the gun being wound, using
English to English.
All right. Bear with me while I try to resurrect myself from my technical difficulties. I know.
we will to be run inboard, in which case the secured tackles and breeching are to be cast off and the gun run inboard. Once the gun has been run inboard, we can commence with the loading procedure, and we start with the gun being wormed. Using the worm, we will to be run inboard, in which case the secured tackles and breeching are to be cast off and the gun run inboard. Once the gun has been run inboard, we can commence with the loading procedure, and we start with the gun being wormed. Using the worm, we will to be run inboard,
It's
in which
hopeless.
case the
Okay.
secured tackles
You're
and
gonna have to suffer with me. So we have
AI taking care of too much out.
well, I obviously should have practiced up here.
Yeah.
So let that be a lesson to me.
Hold up. There it is. There it is. Got it.
Actually, I'm gonna click this.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the gun deck. In this video today, we'll be demonstrating the loading procedures of an 18th century sea service gun. We have here the basic tools needed for loading a gun: the worm, a sponge, the ramrod, and here we have a ladle used in the period before felt powder cartridges. This over here is known as the touch hole reamer. We also have a small ladle, in this case used for priming this model gun. Before we can start the loading procedure, the gun needs to be run inboard, in which case the secured tackles and breeching are to be cast off and the gun run inboard. Once the gun has been run inboard, we can commence with the loading procedure, and we start with the gun being wormed. Using the worm, we will remove any smouldering remnant of the felt cartridge of the previous shot. Once the worming is completed, the gun will be sponged or swabbed by using a thoroughly wetted sponge, which will then finally extinguish any smouldering remnants remaining in the gun barrel. The gun is now ready to be loaded, and a pre-made felt powder cartridge will be brought to the gun in a leather powder canister by a powder monkey.
10-year-old boy.
This will be inserted into the barrel mouth, along with the wadding, which was often a section of hawser, tied off and cut into appropriate sections. This would all then be rammed home. You may have noticed me using my thumb to close the vent hole or touch hole during ramming or sponging. This is another means to make sure that any smouldering embers lingering in the barrel will die. A round shot would now be inserted into the barrel mouth, along with a wadding, and this again to be rammed home. Before the advent of priming coils, the gun captain would prime the gun with a powder horn. However, during the Napoleonic era, goose coils were prepared and priming powder was inserted into them, which made a ready-to-use priming charge, which was then inserted into the vent or touch hole. But before that, the main charge has to be pricked using the reamer. The gun is now ready to be primed, and in this case, with a small model, it'll be primed by using fine powder in the small ladle. The gun is now fully loaded and ready to be fired. On the instruction of the gun captain, the gun would be run out. In its run-out position, the gun's traverse could be altered by using hand spikes and manhandling the gun in this fashion. Similarly, the gun's elevation would be altered by using hand spikes as well, and then adjusting the elevation coin once the suitable position has been found. The gun is now fully ready to fire, and the gun captain would discharge the piece with his flintlock mechanism. Once the gun is discharged, the whole process will start over again. The gun will be wormed and then sponged, and the whole procedure would follow as before. Thank you very much for watching. This is Old Gunner, and take care. Cheerio.
So, thank goodness, that's the best part of the talk. A nice thing for us to know, for you here, is that we actually fire our guns, and you can learn to fire these things yourself. James Thayer, among others, is a great instructor, and we have some new gunners, and we fire them every sale. So that's something that people really like. So having a little bit of familiarity with how these 18th century guns are loaded is a good thing, because that's a frequently asked question. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk about the HMS Rose replica. And I use HMS in quotes because the Rose replica was never His or Her Majesty's ship, of course, right? So if I haven't put HMS in quotes in this part of the talk, that is an error on my part. So what about this replica? I mentioned in the 60s, some guy who probably came from a lot of money, but didn't have much himself, thought it'd be neat to build 5 ships for the bicentennial. And he went to his bank, and they all laughed. And he came back and he said, well, what if I just build 1 ship? And they said, all right, we'll give you $250,000, basically because I think his grandfather started the bank or something. And that was a ridiculously small amount of money, even in those days, in that a ship that would be Coast Guard approved, in other words, having an engine, life support stuff, would probably cost in the millions even then. But he was in contact with a small Nova Scotia shipyard that had built quite a few notable replicas. Said, okay, we could consider building you a ship for $250,000, but things like rigging and your cannon, and the engine and the propeller and the transmission and the shaft, all that stuff is extra. And that's the expensive part of the ship, so we'll do it for you for $250,000. And they did it. And it served as a dockside attraction in Boston for about 10 years and sort of fell into disrepair. It was transferred in '85 to the Rose Foundation and underwent a major refit, including, don't you know, an engine, and it participated in op sale that year. It toured the Great Lakes. It made an East Coast tour from Maine to Florida. And on this tour in '91, it actually was displaying Rhode Island's original draft of the Bill of Rights. That must have been something to see. In '91, the Rose was certified by the American Coast Guard as a Class A sailing school vessel. And it was the first and largest in the USA. Can you imagine, Richard in his talk talks about a couple who, with no sailing experience, just show up at the Rose, and their first test is to climb the rigging to the top of the mainmast to make sure that they're not afraid, to make sure that they're suitable candidates for this 2-week sailing extravaganza that they paid for. In '93, it was the largest of the 5 tall ships in the Racine Sail benefit. And in 2000, it was part of a very large op sale that I have some photos of, and I'll show you. In the '85 to 2000 period, it logged many, many miles as a sail training vessel, a tall ship ambassador, with 30 paying attendees spending about 2 weeks of their time working hard. There's John Millard, and he wrote a number of articles. Apparently they're mostly truthful, as we docents are wont to say, building replicas of Revolutionary warships, and I recommend his article to you. This is the Smith and Rutland, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia yard. Looks pretty unassuming, but they built some beautiful replicas. The Blue Nose in 21, the Sherman Viper in 42, Blue Nose 2. Look at that deck work in the varnish work, just amazing. In 63, the Bounty replica in 61, and our own Rose. Can anybody tell me what harbor that is? Yeah.
Looks like New York.
You know, it looks to me more like Boston or Rhode Island. I'm putting money on Newport, but I don't know. Richard, do you know? Not Newport. She spent most of her life there. Anyway. I mentioned that the Rose was sold to K. Williams in '85, and his daughter ran it as a sail training vessel after a major refit. And this picture is from our library archive. Thank you very much, Dave Clark, for letting me know that that exists. Look how far down she was taken in the refit. And also look at those guys. And I don't mean that guys and gals. In '93, she was a tall ship ambassador in the Great Lakes, and the local paper wrote 12 stories about this over 5 days. And this first one I really like. The title, as you can see, is A Trip Back in Time. And again, Dave Clark often says about our replicas and all of our ships that they're time capsules. And so this author and Dave Clark were probably never met unless Dave actually wrote the article. But they were on the same wavelength, and I view that as a really good way to look at our collection, especially when you go out on a sale. You really get to see what it was like to be on the deck of these vessels in their respective time periods. And so we have a really wonderful treasure at the museum. Some of the other articles shown. And then I mentioned Op Sale 2000, where over 20 of the world's famous tall ships were present and showing their stuff at a variety of cities all along the East Coast. This is a listing including the California, and of course the Rose replica, among basically the famous tall ships of the world. And oh, by the way, there's something happening in 2026. Can anybody tell me what that's going to be about? Another op sale. Oh. I think we should do something. We'll see. Anyway, I mentioned the Rose's bell. It's apparently extremely bad luck to replace a ship's bell because the bell is how time is kept on a ship. Can anybody tell me what the ship's bell, when it's rung, is signifying?
Every half hour.
So every 4 hours, we ring 8 bells in half-hour segments. So at 12, there'll be no bell. At 12:30, 1 gong. 1 o'clock, 2 gongs, and so on until 4 o'clock, 8 bells, and the watch is finished. And on the right side of the screen, you see a photo of the replica in her rose colors. I think she really looks nice. And oh, by the way, what kind of a sailing vessel is this?
Frigate.
Fully rigged ship. How come?
3 masts. All square rig.
Because it has square sails on all 3 masts. Sorry? 3 or more, that's correct. Thank you very much, yes. I appreciate the comments. So I told you I'd finish on time, but first, I found this intriguing photo of the replica from a 2000 figurehead, and somebody must know something about what this figurehead represents, because it's not Athena, right? So, it's a lion. A lion. His name is Chester. Tell us more.
Chester Lion. I believe Chester was just an informal by his crew, but the lion, as in the lion and the unicorn, are the figures of the British crest.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right, so that's the end of my. Yes.
As part of the upgrade or the change to the surprise, they must have changed the figurehead?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And Richard,
To be continued.
Richard is going to,
I'm going to surprise you.
all right. Jump in where I left off. Yes.
I just want to add something. I tell guests that the reason they had so many crew on board is when you saw a ship from the masthead, you had to do one of 2 things. If it was an enemy ship, bigger than you had to run quick. If it was a merchant ship of your enemy, you could capture it for prize money. So you wanted to get all your sails set as fast as you could to get the heck to move the boat. So that's why they had a large crew. That's one of the reasons they had a large crew.
Go ahead.
The original 10 people per gun.
So, as far as I'm concerned, it is the Roadrunners. And we know that it was changed to Surprise for a Hollywood movie. Why wasn't it returned to the name of what the ship actually is?
I'll mention that in my.
The book.
Okay.
So I would say that we could debate that. But it's an interesting point. I am not authorized to speak on the Surprise because that wasn't part of Rhymena.
When the Rose was built, okay, my understanding was there was no gun deck because they could use it as a restaurant.
Correct.
Can you tell us about that real quickly?
Well, there was a question, how much, was it going to be a viable enterprise as a dockside attraction? And so Millar's financial backers said, we really need a plan B. And the plan B is, as you mentioned, the possibility of using her as a restaurant where people would come and dine. And that's why the gun deck is sort of elevated, I think probably a little bit more than a typical gun deck, although probably not so much. And that's why powder monkeys were used to schlep things like the shot and the charges.
So the original Rose, the original HMS Rose, did not have a gun
British
deck.
1757.
It just had a deck that went across. No,
That's right. It didn't have a
the
cut.
1975 Rose.
No, the 1970 Rose is as you see it below.
It had a gun deck?
No.
It had what you see.
The Rose as built, the 1970 John Fitzhugh Millar boat, the bank insisted that it have a 7-foot clearance, kind of minimum for a restaurant, so they could turn it into Captain Billy's Crab Shack if they had reached that. It never was outfitted as a restaurant. However, that deck was clear with the 7-foot clearance all the way across, side to side. And this museum built the build-up, and I'll cover that.
That's okay. That's the story of the museum.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. It's 5 to 11. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll resume at 10 past.
If we are ready. So I will pick it up pretty much where Doug left off. And there is the current figurehead. That is Pallas Athena, not very much lion-like. And there she is at the front of the boat. This is a slide, by the way. I want to give credit to Dick Wolf, who had previously done this. Doug and I are kind of picking up the pieces and sticking them together. So really, where did Surprise start this whole adventure? Well, Surprise actually historically started off life as a French corvette launched at La Unité. Now that name should give you a hint. It was launched during the Napoleonic era. We had stopped naming, in France, we had stopped naming ships after saints and kings. Launched in 1794, 24 8-pounders on the quarterdeck forecastle, 8 4-pounders up on the forecastle. Gun deck length about 126 feet. She was captured at anchor off Tunis in the Mediterranean. She was pretty much overpowered. The French crew tried to set her afire, but was overwhelmed by the British crew of the HMS Constant. Now again, bear in mind when I'm referring to, Doug pointed in his talk, when it's HMS no quotes, we're referring to the historical ship that was in the British Navy. Whether the Brits at that time used HMS or not, most of the time in logs, they just say inconstant, or Surprise, or whatever the name was. She was taken into the British Navy and renamed Surprise. Why? There was already a unity, which is close enough to la unité in the British Navy. You can't have two ships with the same name in the same Navy at the same time. That's a no-no. It makes reading the logs and reports rather tedious. The British upgunned her. That meant improved or enlarged the gun complement. They went from the 8-pounders to 9-pounders, 8 4-pounders up on deck, and two more 4-pounders, I think, down the foredeck. And then there were 2 12-pound carronades. The carronades were a British development. They liked being able to clobber the heck out of the other guy. A carronade is a short-barreled gun, not a long gun. If you have any acquaintance with modern field artillery, it would be kind of like a howitzer versus a long gun. A thing that had a short firing range but fired a heavy shot. Wood ships get busted up by heavy shot. And so a lot of times a ship would be also rated by the total number of pounds that it could issue to its opponent in a broadside. So that throw weight, that's why the ships of the line, as Doug mentioned in his comparison of the first grades versus first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. The first grade ships with 110 or more guns with up to 40-pound shot could beat you know what out of their opponent. The light ships like the corvettes or the 6th-rate frigates would be patrol or signal relay vessels. They would also be sent on minor missions, as Doug discussed in his history of the historic Rose. Now, as HMS Rose, the real ship, she served from 1796 to 1802. She was most featured by capturing or cutting out the Hermione in Portugal, Spain on the October 25th of 1799. What had happened was the Hermione had a significantly worse than usual commander, a cruel son of a gun, and he basically all the people under him mutinied and took the ship into a nominally enemy or quasi-neutral port, a Spanish port. This, of course, is against regulations, needless to say. So the Surprise did the raid on to cut out Hermione. Cutting out means you sneak into port, you overwhelm the standing watch at anchor, the anchor watch, and cut the lines. Too bad, we'll get new anchors, and you tow it away, and the prize crew sails are off. This adventure of cutting out the Hermione actually appears is one of the adventures not included in the movie, but in the Patrick O'Brian fictional Surprise. So the fictional Surprise under Lucky Jack Aubrey does the cutting out of Hermione. And I know some people pronounce that name Hermione, but it's Hermione, like Hermione Granger, that thing about the witch. Now, the other thing is that the historical Surprise was taken out of service and scrapped. Apparently, she had been used hard in that career from her days as Unité as well as Surprise. And so, in 1802, at the Peace of Amiens, that's known as let's stop and rearm, because they started fighting again in 03. But she was taken out of service. Now, we go to the literary Surprise. Literary Surprise is based on a book, on the 20-plus books of Patrick O'Brian. The main characters are Lucky Jack Aubrey and Dr. Stephen Owe. The slide went up. We clipped out Dr. Stephen Matthew, but those were the two principals. Favorite frigate of Lucky Jack Aubrey and in the Patrick O'Brian 21 volumes naval adventures. Aubrey in the book books. Take Command of Surprise in 1805. Of course, that's 3 years after the historical surprise was kindling. So, the fictional Aubrey is based on an actual naval hero, Thomas Cochrane. Now, both Cochrane, historical, and Jack Aubrey, fictional, have the unique distinction of being an absolute genius when there's a ship's deck under their heels, and an absolute forces task when there's gravel and paving stones under their heels. They both got into trouble. The historical Thomas Cochrane actually had to flee Great Britain and retire his commission, and actually helped found the Chilean Navy for our friends in South America. Later there was a change in administration, and so things got quite different. That never happened to this. And so he did come back and was, to a certain extent, reinstated. The fictional surprise, again, it's a theme here, gun. They went to 28 12-pounder long guns. And Surprise as a living, breathing character, as well as the good captain and the good doctor, are featured in 11 of the O'Brien books. That's our lead into HMS Surprise, because HMS Surprise now, we looked at a quote, that should have quotes on the either side of the HMS. It starts off with the book publisher Norton. Norton was hosting a book signing party in New York, and they hired the then Rose to give an atmosphere to it. Patrick O'Brien came out. This was the next to the last book of the series, because he passed away while trying to finish the 21st book. But the next to the last book was Blue at the Mizzen. The Rose was hired for a dockside party. The then owner of the Rose, just to build up trade, painted Rose, gave it coat of paint, to match the description in the book series. So that's how she came. It's on a basically yellow or golden paintings of in photographs of the ship as built as Rose. He painted it to the gold and very deep blue, that's not black, that's blue, of the current ship. And Patrick O'Brien supposedly said, she'd be up there, stand in for a surprise. So O'Brien actually agreed to release movie rights when he passed to the ship. Prior to that, he had put his foot down and while writing the other books, was not going to entertain any offers by any movie or TV productions to do it, because he knew what a hash job most movie studios do to ship stories. It's true. So, 20th Century Fox et al. Steps in. Actually, it was a consortium of 4 different companies: Fox, Miramax Films, Universal Pictures, and Sam Goldwyn Films. They together acquired the movie rights from the O'Brien's estate. They bought the HMS Rose from the HMS Rose Foundation in 2001, supposedly saving another 4-flighter from trying to buy it to go broke. Rose came to San Diego and then to Ensenada, and major structural work, including dry docking to rebuild things, was done at Southwest Marine and then finished up in Ensenada.
Was that right?
Now, some changes were made. Main deck reconfigured, rounded bow added. The capstan was moved forward because they needed it to look pretty and be in a spot, and there's a critical scene in the movie where a ship's boy is tap dancing on the copper-covered lid or top surface of the capstan, to contrast the ordinary sailor versus the doctor and the captain sewing away on violin and cello doing high class, it's a class distinction thing. The ship's wheel was originally after the mizzenmast. It was removed and replaced with the dual wheel in front of the mast. You'll see that when we take our tour. Why? Because it was the French style. Remember, the boat was supposed to have been a French vessel as originally built, the stern structure was significantly reshaped. Fighting tops, the platforms where ship company Marines could go and defend the ship in deck-to-deck incidents. Most fights were very close, very bloody. By the way, that's why U.S. Marines, when they have their dress cover, the officers at least have a quatrefoil on the top, because they decided that it'd be a good idea not to shoot the friendly officers when the Americans started doing this. So the Marines put the quatrefoil so they could tell the friendlies from the unfriendlies. It's really bad to put a hole in your own office. 19th century style yokes and trusses. We'll talk about that when we do our tour, but the original rows had been built to be sailable, have good sailing characteristics, by putting on braces that tie the lower yards to the mast. Unfortunately, when they took the yokes and trusses off and put on truss tackles, the yard came back by about 1.5 foot. But the shrouds didn't come back by 1.5 foot. That meant that instead of being able to brace the yard to 45 degrees to tack the ship, you can only get to about 30. Well, no matter how hard you try. And so that affected negatively her sailing characteristics, but they were only making a movie. They weren't going to go out and sail with it. I mean, for real, like the race or anything. Also, the figurehead was changed. Pallas Athena, which I mentioned, was replaced Chester the Lion. There were rig changes. Royal masts and yards on the fore and the main. Studding sails. These are extra sails that can be placed outboard of the regular sails. On this ship, they are on the foremast, first mast, and they give the ability to catch more wind. Kind of like the tricks you play with spinnakers on a racing yacht, except this wasn't a racing yacht, but you did have to run away. As Doug pointed out, you either had to run away from a ship that could beat you up, or if you're going to try and capture the ship, you had to catch that ship. And so you wanted your ability to sail both upwind and downwind. And if you had lots of sails put up, you can get a little more speed. The mizzen topsail, the third mast, was on the rows was a very tall, over tall, taller than it was wide. That was replaced with a topsail and topgallant, 2 sails on the mast. Of course, if you look at the boat right now, you'll notice there are no yards on the mizzen, so it's not a ship right now, it's another bark. The other thing that was done to make it look more period authentic was the wire standing rigging was covered up with plastic sheets to make it look like a heavy, hard hemp. That's great for visuals, but it's not so great for the status of the steel cable underneath when rain collects. So that's another problem. So they went down to Baja Fox Studios. They used a huge fuel tank with a swivel mount that was used to sink the Titanic in that movie. They built another copy. I call it kind of either the Lego or Tinker Toy model. But the Lego is best because they could blow it up and stick it back together again. It was basically most of the deck and the rigging up to about the fighting tops. And then they added fans, a jet engine. There's a hurricane scene in the movie. Now, all interior shots in the movie were done on sound set, whether it's gun deck or captain's cabin. The only time they used the surprise, what we have here, was for open deck scenes. There are several. There's a discipline scene where somebody has messed up and he gets a cat of nine tails. There was one, what I call pudding cannon, installed in the surprise, right outside the gentleman's head. It ran on steam and compressed air, and then they used computer graphics, basically Photoshop in, so they could do a broadside, but they only had one gun that actually went bang. All of the guns that you would see on the ship were prop guns that were used in the movie, on the sound stage. They were never on the ship during making the movie. Again, this repeated theme. Peter Weir, the director, upsized the prop guns to 24-pounders. So they didn't look manly enough. So bigger guns. He's a director. The movie. Okay, bottom line, it was released November 14th of 2003. It did have some critical acclaim. British Arts Film and Television Award, BAFTA, was won by Peter. There were some other technical awards won from the Oscars, but it came out the same season as Pirates of the Caribbean #1. Tough competition. The Master and Commander, Far Side of the World, actually made money. They didn't lose money. But Disney prints money. That's why there's 4 Pirates of the Caribbean series, and there was only 1 Master and Commander. So lack of that bang in the Oscar and lack of the outrageous printing money story of Disney Studios, interest in making a sequel to Master and Commander dried up. There was some talk as late as 21, but it never came to be. So here's Surprise as she sits early in her career in San Diego, in the Maritime Museum. You'll notice that there is a red Royal Navy flag at the mizzen. That's not quite technically correct because you're not supposed to wear that unless you are a British registered ship in the British Navy, but oh well. So, Fox leased the Surprise to the Maritime Museum after the movie. And then, due to a generous donation, the Maritime Museum acquired ownership of the vessel officially in 2005. Fox initially retained a 5-year first right of refusal lockout on movie use. They gave us ship's guns, signed arms, there was some uniform artifacts, there was a lovely coat, officer's coat that grew legs and went away. From 2004 through 2008, the staff, several people in this room, I helped, I stubbed my toe a couple of times, we built the gun deck shelf that you see. So that was not there. Remember, we discussed that the ship was originally built with 7-foot clearance, so in case there was a default on the loan, the bank could sell it as Captain Billy's Grab Shack. So it was built for at least minimum restaurant height. We built the shelf so that the prop guns could be loaded into the ship and met with the gun ports. It looks a little better than having them point straight up. Of course, we got them in there, and then we had to take them all out so that the Coast Guard could do stability, angles and dangles check, before re-registering the vessel as, quote, HMS, unquote, Surprise, and getting it back to certification for sailing. There was a plan originally to sail it on the 2006 birthday sail with Star, but we couldn't get the Coast Guard approval for that. So she didn't sail. I think she sailed with a Star in 2008. Seven. That's right. Seven. Right at the end of our work. Another point was that the copper sheathing was removed from the hull. You're not supposed to have copper sheathing in contact with the water for the same reason you're not supposed to use cuprinol paint. You kill all the little buggies in the water, and not just the ones that are trying to eat your coal. You kill the ones that are feeding the fish that people are taking home to have for dinner. That's not so good.
Question.
Yes.
Quick question. The cannon on the ship, the guns.
Guns.
The heavy iron ones, where are they from? Because there's plastic ones, but then there's some real ones.
Oh, all of the guns that you see on the ship right now are fiberglass with a faux tube inserted to look like the barrel. Those don't weigh anything like what real iron guns are.
There's some in the there's two in the captain's cabin. There's
yeah,
one
yeah,
in the
they're
quarterdeck,
all
and
they're
real.
all replica. They're all replica guns. They're basically fortified fiberglass.
No, they're steel. They're iron.
There's a couple.
The two on the captain's cabin are real.
Okay, those may be. I don't know where those came from. You got me.
Okay.
I only know about the ones that are on the gun deck proper.
They're like very.
And those are the ones that back in 07, when I was first starting out as both a docent and working for a while with sail crew, we had to haul out of the hull. And that's when we discovered that the capstan was not tied to anything wrong. So we said, oh, let's use the capstan. Oh, good idea. So we threw a line around the capstan, and then there was awful noises. The gun wasn't moving, but the capstan was. And not just roundy go roundy. Bad idea. The other thing, so Surprise could now sail legally under Coast Guard certification. We did sail her to Los Angeles for their festival sail event, as well as participating in our local festival sail parades. At that time, the tacking performance of the Star was very poor. Remember I said the brace, the 2-foot iron brace that was very common, in fact it's repeated in real life on the Star of India, was something that was early 1800s, i.e. after the Napoleonic Wars. And, but the movie company didn't move the rigging, so you couldn't brace. So she sailed like a pig, as Captain Chris Bolton said. I know she sails like a pig, but she's our pig. So those of us of imagination decided that a birdie to that effect would be appropriate. So a flag was made up with a cutout of a pig with wings. And yours truly contributed, after digging back in his memory, well, what we have to have an appropriate thing. I went back to the book Winnie the Pooh, a Latinized version of Winnie the Pooh. And in the Winnie the Pooh, Piglet is referred to as Porcellus, little pig. Well, Porcellus is masculine, so I converted it to Porcella Nostra, and that's on the flag. So that was a big hit in Los Angeles. We want to go see the piggy boat. So after that, having to do diesel hauls whenever we did a demo sail of it was kind of a drag. Diesel haul means that instead of the command mainsail haul, the captain starts the engines. And in sailing competition, it's called cheating. So we did locate the original 19th century Rose era yokes and trusses. Those are the wide, I call them wide braces because that's the shape. They let the thing move. And so now you could actually brace the yards. The ship could tack. Imagine that. Another movie. Well, by 2010, remember our old nemesis, Disney, that played the adventures of Fox Studio et al. On the Master and Panda movie? They were going to make Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. That's the fourth movie of that series, portraying the fictional HMS Providence. The 5-year exclusion clause had run out. So, also, it got used in a TurboTax Super Bowl commercial recreating the Boston Tea Party. They made the Embarcadero wall here into Boston Harbor. Took the surprise, parked her there, bow facing north, waited till it was after midnight and they weren't landing planes at Linwood Field. It would be a time conflict in terms of recreating the Revolutionary War and having jet planes over there. I believe the line was, "What are you doing? We're testing the tea tax." "Well, haven't you heard? Taxes are free now." "Oh, well, never mind." So that was the whole thing. Subsequently, we've used the boat for education programs, strongly focusing on the Revolutionary War. Case you have half of a group of students, you say, okay, you guys are loyalists, you guys are revolutionary. What do you think happened when the war was over? And of course, if you were loyalists, your only choice was to get a ticket back to Great Britain because you weren't going to be popular with your neighbors anymore, given the change of government. So also handy, acquainting them with what was like to work on a ship. We would do things of having them move spot loads around using lifting tackle on the ship, team building. So it was education. Now we come to where we are. Well, the last major effort for Surprise was redecking. The deck was leaky as heck. We kept losing video projection capability for we had 3 monitors doing scenes, well, 2 of them were doing scenes from the movie, and another one was running a actual loop on using real guns firing real balls, not like the little one that Doug had, against fixed targets, because there are people that are actually crazier than we are that go and do live fire exercise with ammunition and ball, not just salutes like we do, against mock ships and bulkheads. Like I said, there are people that are actually crazier than we are. But the deck was so leaky that every time we had a rainstorm, we would lose 1 or more of those monitors. So we did a redeck of the Surprise using a technique that had been developed originally for the Star of India. This is not a solution for everything. There are still water retention problems on a wood ship, whether it is your enemy. It did improve the watertight integrity with this 3-layer system. It's 2 marine plywood layers, a fiberglass layer, plywood, fiberglass layer, plywood, fiberglass layer, and then half-sawn deck planks. Instead of 4x4s, they are untrimmed 2x4s, not finished, not S4S, but untrimmed. That means they're actually 2x4 with a notch on the side for a sealed keyway, a faulty keyway. That did help the watertight integrity. And in fact, the ship is pretty much held together by that deck. It's a 55-year-old wooden ship built on a very tight budget. Remember that $250,000 when it really should have cost about $1 million to do a proper ship even in 1970, and would cost tens of millions now. Maintenance headaches still abound. We just got the ship back a couple months ago from a yard period down at Marine Systems. Coast Guard inspected it and they weren't happy about the main mast step. Well, that's easy to fix. You pull the main mast. Well, pull the main mast, you take all the main mast rigging down, and then you get a big crane in. Well, you got some money? So that's the problem. And then the maintenance headaches abound. Stay tuned. The museum has to answer some hard questions in terms of what we're going to do with her. But one of my logins on several of my accounts is Frigate Buff because I like her. And that's the story. Oh, somebody pointed out, I mentioned the Royal Marines, and in that case also the U.S. Marines, doing the fighting tops. The other assignment for the Marines, other than keeping traffic going one way and make sure people don't go ashore that aren't supposed to go ashore, was in sailing maneuvers to man the mizzen mast. It's the shortest mast on the ship, least complicated. It's actually one that we would let the kids in the education class brace the yards of because it was relatively simple and light to handle. So that's what we did. And that tradition carries on. There are always Marines assigned to U.S. Navy ships. And in fact, on the USS Missouri, the last time I was aboard her in Hawaii, one of the twin 5-inch 38 guns, multi-purpose guns, has the Eagle Globe and Anchor Marine symbol, because that was the Marines battery. We still keep them, and they're basically to keep people out of the officers' country and to make sure that nobody goes ashore that's not supposed to be going ashore. So stay tuned. More later. We hope to find out which direction we're going to go with this ship. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks to Dave Clark for his efforts, and also Rich Wolf for providing some of the slides that we use and some of the information. That's the rest of the story. Thank you. I'm going to do the walk around as soon as I get rid of this.
One thing